Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there, and you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing today? Good, I hope. I'm doing good myself here down in South Florida. Okay, and I know I always mention, working on my farm, looking at the weather report when I wake up in the morning. Like I tell everybody, not till you have a small micro farm do you realize just what the weather report really means to people that are farming, even on a small scale like I'm doing. And I'm about to also, I know you guys, I've mentioned before that the rescue dog that I got from last year had a puppy, and then that puppy made different puppies on it because I didn't think that I was waiting to neuter him. And well, bottom line, I have 6 puppies, which now I'm in the process of getting good homes for. So yeah, I'm vegetables, fruits, and chickens and puppies. Yep, that's what my life consists of right now. But anyway, guys, let me tell you a little bit about the guest that I have today. I'm very excited. Okay, and again, this usually is reserved for those who work in the paranormal field and have good experience in that. Usually, what I call paranormal investigators who do it. And I've mentioned this before. A lot of the things that we see on paranormal reality TVs, I know they call themselves paranormal investigators, but not really, because they have a lot of people behind the scenes that do the hard work for them, the heavy lifting, and they come in for a few days, and then they might catch stuff, and they might not, and then away they go. And it's the people that sometimes go out there and are not well known. That's who I consider our real paranormal researchers of today. So let me tell you a little bit about the lady that's here. Her name is Kat Ward. Now, Kat's had a passion for the paranormal since she was a child. And that's one of my first questions, so we'll get into that later. Now, growing up, she had paranormal experiences that made her want to know more about what goes bump in the night. And we've discussed this before, that this is where the fork in the road comes for a lot of people that have childhood experiences. Either they're intrigued by it or they run away from it. Now, she joined her first paranormal investigative team over 6 years ago called Canadian Supernatural Research Society, located in Ontario, Canada. Now, she enjoys talking to people about the paranormal, and now she has her own podcast called Paranormal Heart, where she speaks to people about their paranormal experiences. You can find her show on Podbean the last Sunday of every month, and of course, as you know, I'm going to have a link to it at the credits of the show. But anyway, it's paranormalheart.podbean.com, and we'll repeat that information at the end of the show. But in the meantime, let me get her on. How are you doing today, Kat?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Great, fantastic. So, as I mentioned before, but even though you gave us a clue right off the get-go when we talked about your childhood,
Hmm.
Obviously, you had a childhood experience. What happened, Kat? What was that experience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really, really excited to be
No,
here.
thank you. No, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, when I was between the ages of about 5 and 12 or 13, I grew up, I'm Canadian. I grew up on
Mm-hmm.
the east coast of Canada in a province called New Brunswick. And the town that we lived in, Dieppe, my parents and I lived in a 3-story apartment building. We lived on the top floor. Very, very old building. And like I said, we lived there between the ages of 5 and 12 or 13. And that building was so old that in the basement, there used to be a furnace. It was a coal furnace. That's how they used to heat the building.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
they changed it over to electric heat, several years later. But that gives you an indication of how old the building was.
Okay.
And the building was always a very creepy feeling. Even my friends, when they'd come over, they'd say, this is a creepy house, apartment. And it's like, yeah, I know. And I always thought the creepiest part of the building was my bedroom. Of course, it had to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as soon as you walk into the apartment, that section of the apartment building had the living room and then my parents' room. And you'd move to the left, it would be the dining room, as well as the washroom, and then the kitchen, and then my room. So my room was way at the other end compared to where my parents' room was. I have no siblings, it's just myself and my parents.
Okay.
And like I said, always creepy. And I had a big walk-in closet. And I don't remember how old I was or how many times I've seen him, but I saw the Hat Man.
You did.
But
Oh.
he was short. He was about 4 feet tall.
Oh.
And yeah, scared the bejesus out of me. And I would scream for my parent. I'd say, "There's a man in my closet, a man in my closet." And he'd be
Right.
walking around my room like he was working or doing something. Just he never really paid attention to me, and I was
Okay.
really thankful for that. I don't know if he knew I was there or what, but I would have those covers up, right below my eyes, just, please don't see me, don't make any sounds.
Yes.
And even now, my dad says, I remember you growing up in that apartment building and you used to talk about the man in the closet. Now, there's this one funny incident. I don't remember if it was day or night, but my father and I are standing in the walk-in closet and he's trying to rest assured nothing's here. You're fine. You're dreaming. And he'd say, kid, there's nothing here at night that isn't here in the daytime.
Oh,
Me
okay.
being me being me, I looked at him with big eyes and said, he's here in the daytime too.
I was about to say that's not
Yeah,
comforting to a kid.
yeah. And he tells me today that, I kind of regret asking you that question. It's supposed to help you, not scare you. And I was afraid of the daylight for the longest time,
Yeah.
in my room in the daytime as well. So, but there was one night, this only happened the one time. There was one time my arm was hurting and I screamed for my parents. And of course, they came running. And I said, my arm hurts. So they turned the light on and they looked at my arm and I had scratches on my arm. Now, I don't remember how many scratches are on there. I just remember there was a burning feeling on my arm and on the forearm. And I don't know. That never happened again.
Okay.
So my parents, it got to the point where, every night would be the same ritual. Would look under the bed, would check the closet, nothing here. But I would see him for many years. And even as an adult, like I never really spoke about him very much because the kids would always think that I was weird, the girl
Mm-hmm.
that likes ghosts. Well, now I'm still the girl that likes
Yeah.
ghosts.
Yeah,
But
but
I never really talked about it for the longest time. And one night I was listening to a podcast. Oh, I can't remember how many years ago now. I want to say 5 years ago.
okay.
What was the name of the show? Paratruth Radio.
Okay.
And the guests that they had on there they were talking about a Hat Man. Now I never really heard about
Mm-hmm.
this creature, specter, whatever you want to call it, before.
Right.
And he started describing it, and he says it wasn't tall. He was short, 4 feet tall. And I thought, oh, someone else has
Yes.
seen this thing. And now this Hat Man was always always haunted my memories. Not to the point where I was afraid, but I always
Yeah.
wondered, who is he? What is he? Why was he there? Has anyone else seen him? So when I heard this encounter on another paranormal talk show, I thought, oh, wow. So I messaged the host of the show and said, hey, I've also encountered the Hat Man. So he says, I'm going to send you a link. So he sends me this link to a YouTube channel,
Okay.
and this man, also had an encounter as a boy. He tried to reenact what the Hat Man looked like from what he remembered as a boy. That video scared the crap out of me because I said to
Wow.
myself, "Oh my God, that's exactly what I saw." I can send you the link if I can find the
That would
footage.
be great. I would love to see that.
Just, oh yeah, it just terrified me for, just all those childhood memories and
Well, you
feelings
know
came
what?
back.
Well, you know what? And it's surprising because a lot of people, like you said, they're kind of isolated, thinking
Mhm.
that they're the only ones that have had this experience.
Right.
And it's good to know somebody else had it, but at the same time, it's like reinforces, almost for lack of a better word, the reality
Hmm.
of your experience. Like, oh my God, I can't. This is not even imagination. This is
Yeah.
something that really happened to me.
Now, I've looked a little bit into the Hat Man, and apparently he's usually very tall and skinny.
Yeah.
Mine was short, and apparently there were encounters with the shorter version as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much as the tall one. And I spoke to a psychic medium a few years ago, and I said, "Hey, I used to see this thing when I was a kid." Described it to her, and I said, "What do you think it was?" And she said, "He was there to protect you." And I'm like, "Protect me?" So then I started thinking that time that I was scratched, I wonder if he was there, like, because it only happened the one time. Because at first I thought maybe it was him that did it. But now that I think back, it's like perhaps he was there to protect me. And
What
that's what he
what
was doing.
what
He'd
kind of
walk
hat
around my
was he
room.
wearing, Kat? What kind of
Those,
hat?
that the big brimmed hat, I can't remember what they're called.
Not a
Oh,
top hat. And the reason why I
no,
even
not a
ask
top
is
hat.
that I know everybody's got. I've heard people saying they've heard like seen like cowboy hats. They've
Mm.
other people have heard like the top hat. Other people like the hooded. The like the hooded figure.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and I was thinking, I wonder, since you said that building was so old, is it possible that your room being apart could have at some point maybe been like a servant's room thing or
I don't
something like
know.
that?
Because the building, it's at 3 stories, and each story had an apartment, so there's three families. So it wasn't a very big apartment building complex. It was just,
Right.
three families living in the building.
Okay.
So I don't know. It's
That's why
possible.
I'm thinking, usually is when you mentioned that thing about it being, really old, you
Hmm.
know, sometimes, they, in other words, the layout, the original layout, as far as who was using it is not who you expect.
Hmm.
Excuse me. But that's really interesting. And how long did you see him? How was there a point that he
Oh.
just stopped appearing or you guys moved out?
He stopped when we moved out.
Wow.
Yeah, I never saw him again, thankfully. And the apartment building's not there anymore. Now I live in Ontario, in Canada.
Okay.
And I always wanted to be able to go back and potentially ask anyone else who's lived in the building, hey, because there was another family after we moved out that lived there,
Okay.
and then they tore it down. But I always wondered, did they encounter anything as well?
Wouldn't you love to be able to speak to those
Oh,
people?
I would. I'd like to know more of the history of the building. I've been trying to find out over the years, and I just can't find anything. I might have to actually go home sometime and go to the local library and ask if there's any information on it.
Yeah, because if they had that furnace all the way in the basement, yeah, like you said,
Hmm.
it sounds like it was a pretty old building, or
Yep.
as far as the original. And was it always an apartment building, or was it, how they would take houses and then
Yeah.
divvy them up to make apartments,
Hmm.
or had it always been an apartment building, or you don't know at this point?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
assuming it was always an apartment building, but I don't know.
Right. And you know what I'm talking about, how some of these really big houses,
Hmm.
at some point, they just make them into apartments because somebody's trying to make a lot of money out of, instead of
Yeah.
renting a big
Yeah.
house. So
Hmm.
here you are, you move away, you don't see him anymore.
No.
What happened? Any other encounters?
Yeah, still living in the same town. I was a teenager, and there's this place in the Moncton area called Rebecca's Grave, and all teenagers go there.
Okay.
In carloads. Some of them drink. And
Right.
pretty much every location has a
Yeah.
spot like that.
Yes.
So when we heard about this, we got a bunch of friends. I think we had like two carloads. Now the backstory on Rebecca was she was a witch, her and her mother.
Okay.
And when they died, they buried her and put concrete on top of their graves to make sure that they can't come back. So we had to go check this out. And then we heard there was cabin because it was a wooded area, quite a few feet away from the actual grave. There was nobody else buried there. It wasn't like a big cemetery or anything. It was just these two. And they say that their old cabin was still in the woods, abandoned, obviously. So a bunch of us, 2 carloads, we go up. We have to check it out. Sure enough, there's the concrete, there's the graves,
Wow.
and it was kind of a winding road, and all of a sudden this man appears out of nowhere in this truck. It says, "You kids better get out of here." Now, of course, we freaked out because we didn't hear
Yes.
anything. But
Right.
who knows? He just disappeared. Like he drove off, and all of a sudden he's gone. So of course we're like, let's get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
But I guess this was the first time that I actually investigated, because I went to the library back when we had microfiche, and I
Yes.
actually did a little bit of digging to find out about Rebecca, and I found out her name was Rebecca Ann Lutz. And I don't remember anything else, but I remember as a teenager going, and I did a little bit of research, went back to the site with friends again. Friend found the cabin in the woods. I didn't want to go in the woods,
Yeah, you're like,
but but I guess technically that was the first time that I investigated. But that was back. I'm 52 now, so that's back before anybody really knew about paranormal investigating.
right, right. And and in my experience, the research, it's almost like, you want to know the truth, and sometimes you realize, especially those type of like
Mhm.
urban myth kind of thing where all the
Yeah,
kids go to, when you start doing the research, sometimes it goes nowhere.
yeah.
And then every once
Well,
in a
now,
while you find that's great. There was actually a person by
yeah.
that name.
Now there's been a band in Moncton named Rebecca Lutz, or no, Rebecca's Grave. And
Okay.
there's a man from my hometown as well who did a little documentary on Rebecca's grave. I've never seen it, but I'd love to see it. I guess he had it in the local theaters for a while, and for a longest time, that's the only way you could watch it, was being at the
Mm-hmm.
theater. But I think it's been released someplace, and I've been trying to find it,
Really?
but it would be interesting to see.
Sure. Absolutely. Because like I said, very seldomly, sometimes you'll find something along those lines, but very
Hmm.
seldomly do you actually realize that was a real person that did live there by that name, and that is the right name.
Yep. Yep.
And that's fascinating. I love research. I love research. And sometimes I myself, sometimes of doing research, have come across darker stories than the actual story that's being told.
Hmm.
Like it gets a little bit watered down, like how they say lost in translation. And then when you do the
Yeah.
research into history, or you find darker stuff has gone on there, and you're like, wow, no wonder this area has maybe got a reputation for being
Hmm.
haunted or for people seeing things. It's because XYZ took place, either on the land, that part of the land, or some
Hmm.
structure that was not there any longer. And so here you are. You're right. That's your first investigation. So at what point did you think, okay, you know what? It's fun to go and maybe like go someplace, but I want to do the actual investigative part of paranormal work.
Well, when I was in my 20s, the local university was going to be offering a course on parapsychology,
Oh
and of
wow.
course I jumped on it.
Yeah.
I signed up, paid my money, and then a little while later, I get a check in the mail saying thank you. They didn't have enough people, so they had to
Oh
cancel it. There was only
wow.
3 people that signed up. They needed 12. I was so
Oh.
disappointed.
I
I
was gonna
never
say
got
how disappointing.
I think if it would have been today, they would have had to have more than one class, because
Yes.
so many people are into the paranormal now, and it's not
Yes.
taboo as much as it used to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. Back then, it was. You're absolutely right. Back then, there would even I think even if there's people that would have been interested, they would have felt funny. Like,
Yeah.
no, no, I won't go because I'll get weird looks. Like, or yeah, people
Yeah.
like they had a little more stigma in the sense of, I don't want to be considered the kook.
Yeah.
Whatever.
My friends made fun of me and I didn't care. I'm like, this is cool. Come on, guys.
Right. What? You know what? And I have found that a lot of, I'm not all the time, but a lot of the people is sometimes like are very dismissive. It's because they're almost afraid of being proved wrong. Because
Hmm.
then where do they go with that? It's like,
Yeah.
okay. Or they've had some experience. And like I said, they run in the other direction. They're like, I'm going to pretend that was my imagination, and
Hmm.
everything having to do with the paranormal is made up, or people just their imagination going wild because they're afraid. They're actually afraid
Mhm.
of admitting that they had a true paranormal experience. Even if it was just once, sometimes that's all it takes, especially if it was very intense.
Yeah, and your mind's got to try and come up with a reasonable explanation as to what you just saw, what you just experienced, and that's just normal.
And did you ever either go someplace or have any other experiences having to do with any type of paranormal event?
Yeah, when I was pregnant with my oldest, I have two kids,
Mm-hmm.
back in New Brunswick, but we're living in a different town. And my husband and I was pregnant. We go to this museum, and so I go into this one room. It was called the shadow room, where they had dark curtains and lights, and you could just play around with shadows, right? So I walk in, and my husband and I just stop, like there's a wall stopping me from going in. So my husband says, "What are you doing? Come in." I'm like, "I'm trying, but I can't." He goes, "What do you mean you can't?" I said, it's like something is stopping me from going in. I can't go in." He goes, "Well, it's really cool in here." I'm like, "Yeah, but I can't." So then, of course, being pregnant, I need to use the washroom. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Okay, I'll be right back. Gotta go to the washroom." As soon as I walked in, closed the door, and I felt this sorrow like I've never felt in my entire life. I felt like everything was lost, there's no hope.
Wow.
So then I come out, and then I'm fine. And my husband looks at me and could see the look on my face. He goes, "What's wrong?" And I explained to him what happened. And he smiles. I'm like, "What the heck are you smiling?" I goes, "Turn around." I turn around, and the two washrooms, for the men and the women, um, there was bars. It used to be an old jail. So they had
Oh,
converted two of the
wow.
jail cells into washrooms. And I didn't know this. I thought it was just an old museum, right? But no, it
Right.
used to be an old jail. And that shadow
Yes.
room was the warden's office. I found out after. And I tried messaging the museum and told them my experiences and to find out if anybody else had experienced anything. I never got anything back. I was really
Wow.
disappointed over that. But no, the feeling, oh, yeah.
And
But
it's yeah, that's incredible.
yeah, as soon as I walked out, I was fine. And then once we had our daughter, we went back to the museum because it was a pretty cool museum. They had it was like a science museum. So we went back, and I said, "Okay, you go into that shadow room with our daughter. I'm going to stay behind because I don't want her feeling anything off of me. I want to see if she's going to react to it." So he's got her on his shoulders, and he walks in, and she's kind of fidgeting and squirming and making noises, but the closer he gets to that room, then he backs off, and she's fine. So
Wow.
obviously she was picking up on something as well.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Well, and even if it wasn't an act of haunting, which even just a residual, but that is so appropriate as far as the kind of feeling that whoever was there would have felt.
Yeah.
And same thing with the warden's office.
Mhm.
I wonder, sometimes, I imagine going to see the warden must have been like, I imagine maybe it wasn't the best thing or,
Probably.
yeah, it was, it could have been a mixed bag depending, I guess, on what type of person was running the place.
Hmm.
But absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been to some prisons, which obviously, afterwards they've been, they're already closed down. And let me tell you, the feeling that you get off of certain areas or certain cells,
Hmm.
it's very, you can almost feel it. Like when you step into a room that's got a different temperature, whether it's hot or cold, that you physically feel a
Hmm.
different feel.
Yep.
I've had that experience, and it's like, wow. And then, you look around, it's like, do I have a vent blowing on me? No. Uh, what is it? And I've even had the experience where a strange, the lighting goes dimmer, even though
Hmm.
there's no lighting difference, in other words.
Yep.
But the light almost like dims down a little bit. And that people don't realize how human emotion can like weave itself into the fabric, well, not actually, but the metaphysical fabric
Hmm.
of a place, especially like if you think about a prisoner cell where you're in there so many hours and all you've got is time to think
Hmm.
and feel. And yeah.
It's almost like the intense emotions were recorded into the walls and the floors, and.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so At some point, it sounds what you finally decided to go in and join a paranormal team, or how did you find yourself doing that?
Yeah, well, we moved to the Ottawa Valley in Ontario, and I had a friend on Facebook message me and said, "Hey, there's this woman that I just saw post saying that she wants to start a paranormal team, and she's looking for people to join the team, and they're going to have a meet and greet, at the local coffee shop." And I know you're into that, so why don't you give her a shout? So I said, "Sure. What's her name?" She says, "Her name's Katie Turner." It's like, okay. So I messaged her and I said, "Hey, messaged. I said, I'm interested in joining." So we had a big meet and greet. My husband's like, "Are you kidding me? You're going to go meet them?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He goes, "What if they're a bunch of wingnuts?" I'm like, "Well, then I'll say thank you very much for the coffee.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet you. I'll leave." He says, "Okay, fair enough." So met them. They were a bunch of wingnuts, but I like them.
Yes, like
Great team.
harmless ones,
Yeah.
like
So joined the team, and yeah, just the first investigation we did, it was really interesting because it was an elderly gentleman, I think it was 94, 92, something like that, and apparently his house was haunted, and so one of the team members knew him, so we thought, well, we're gonna cut our teeth, and go do this investigation. Katie's investigated before, and I don't think anybody else has really done any of it before.
okay.
So Katie and I are in the main bedroom. The rest of the team's in one of the spare bedrooms right next to it. And of course, we start off. If there's anybody here, please give me some knocks. So we hear the knocks, and of course, it's like, oh my God, this is really exciting. So then I started thinking, it's like, well, the knocks came from over there, and the team is over there at the opposite end of the room. So it wasn't one of the team members messing around with us.
Right.
So then we said, "Could you knock?" I can't remember and maybe 4 times. And we get 4 knocks. And we thought, oh my, this is amazing. So of course, my first time out of the gate
Yeah.
to be able to get something like that.
Beginner's
Some people
luck.
might think that's minuscule, but to me, that was the most amazing thing.
Yeah, no. Well, it's sign of an intelligent haunting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was,
And did you guys ever find? Did he have any suspicions as homeowners as to who it was, or
I don't remember.
you know? And that's unusual.
Yeah.
Usually, older people there at that point they don't really care. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, whatever. It's
Yeah.
haunted. Yeah. In other words, they're like, unless
But
I'm sorry. Go
he
ahead.
was there sorry, go ahead.
No. You were saying
Oh.
that he was there. What?
Oh, he was there with us with his little walker, and we gave him a little EMF detector, and we made him an honorary, member of the team, and he was loving this.
I
He'd
bet.
walk through the house, and yeah, it was pretty neat.
And what did he just? Do you remember at all what was going on that he had decided at that point that he needed to get a paranormal team in there?
I don't really remember.
Okay, but this was you. But for you, I guess, even though it sounds like you were really into the paranormal and you had some experiences, this was the first time of actually, how can I say, an intelligent haunting. It like interacted. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, okay, it wasn't just not a creepy feeling, which if I really get down to it, I could say, well, it's my imagination.
Hmm.
This actually responded to questions.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating,
Wow.
and then I was hooked.
Yeah. That usually will draw you in. Because
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people, I say, you know what? Some people join these paranormal teams thinking that they're going to have a replay of what they see on TV.
Yeah.
And then they go to these really boring things that nothing happens. Either one, because there's nothing there, or two, because it's just not an on-demand thing, the supernatural. And they're like, man, I feel like going to sleep.
Yeah. Like, investigating is kind of like on TV, but not really, because on the episodes, every episode they get so much
Right.
evidence, and it's not like that. Most of the time, you're sitting in a dark room talking to yourself,
Yeah.
waiting for something to happen,
Yeah, you're talking to
It's
thin air, or,
yeah, yeah.
or you're hoping it's not. But yeah, it's like, or it takes more time. It's much
Mhm.
more subtle sometimes, I want to say also, depending on, if it's intelligent, if it's residual. Sometimes if it's residual, sometimes it'll happen and then it'll disappear for months and then come back. It's really weird. But yeah, no, I've heard of a lot of people that go all enthusiastic into paranormal hunting, and then they
You get
It
disappointed.
fades. It
Yeah.
fades. Yeah.
And you don't have to investigate just at night.
Oh, of course not.
A
Absolutely
lot of
not.
people think you have to, but no, it's there's chances are it's there during the daytime. I firmly
Yes.
believe the reason why we investigate at night is because it's generally quieter, so you can hear
Mm-hmm.
better.
Yes.
But if someone says the majority of the activity happens during the daytime, we're going to go in the daytime.
Sure.
And at the same time that if it happens every day at 2 in the afternoon, we're going to be there for 2 in the afternoon.
Well, I tell everybody, and exactly what you said before, because everybody thinks it's spooky the nighttime, and I say, you know what? Absolutely, yes. Like, of course, everything's quiet outside and
Hmm.
inside, but I go, if you think about it, most humans were active during the daytime.
Hmm.
And if this entity is following some type of routine that they used to in life, then there are certain times when you're more apt to possibly capture something, whether it's mornings, afternoons, in the evenings, maybe when people would be coming back into their homes. If it's one of these entities that's stuck on this loop of reliving or redoing what they would do,
Hmm.
absolutely the daytime hours is when you're more apt to capture, if not an actual visual apparition, at least noises
Hmm.
of things going on. Sometimes it's more difficult, I guess, like you said, if you've got other noise that you could say, well, let's say if you're trying to capture something and you can't because it's contaminated from outside noises. But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. People don't realize most people were active during the daytime overall
Hmm.
for everything,
Yeah.
whether it was work, um, even if, let's say, the entity happened to have been a housewife. By this I mean somebody that stayed at home. There was usually high points in the morning, maybe in the evening when the family would be coming home and
Hmm.
activity was going on. I mean, a lot of it also depends on the background of where you're at, or if you know any history at all.
Yeah.
Um, and so what, like you said, here you are, you're hooked. So what happened after that? You decided to, okay, I'm ready now. Did you ever go into any investigation that you felt, okay, I'm out of my depth on this?
No, not really. There was one investigation we did. It was at a local business, and we're just setting up.
Mm-hmm.
It was my job to set up the camera, so I had the cables in my hand. I'm getting ready, to put the cameras in various rooms, and all of a sudden, I stopped, and I felt like something was trying to go through me. And Katie comes up to me, and she's a psychic medium. She comes
Mm-hmm.
up to me, she goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm looking at her wide-eyed, and she sounded like she was way at the other end of the hall. And I
Okay.
shook my head no, and she says, "Something tried to go through you." And I shook my head yes. She goes, "I like to carry selenite crystals on me for protection."
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't even put them on yet in my pockets yet because I was still setting up. She says, "You need to get your crystals. You need to get them now." So
Yeah.
I dropped the cables right there and I booked it for my case. And normally I just keep one piece on me. I
Yeah.
had three pieces in my case and I shoved those suckers in my pockets, all three
Yes.
pieces.
Yeah.
And then I just walked around and I'm praying to ancestors and to God and everything's like, please, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that was, keep them away from me. And
Right.
I'm envisioning white light pushing out, and I'm saying out loud, you are not welcome to touch me or to take me over to communicate. We have these devices to communicate with you. You are not to touch me or any of the team members. So when it came time to go down in the basement, that's where they decided to start the investigation. I opted to stay behind and look at the TV cameras, the
Right.
screens while they were down there. And they said, "Oh, Kat, are you afraid?" I'm like, it was an old dirt floor basement. So I said, "No,
Okay.
there's spiders down there and I don't want to go down."
Yeah. It's
So I
practical.
just did, yeah, and I needed to use every ounce of my will to keep whatever that was away from me. So I just didn't find it was appropriate for me to go downstairs at the time. I just needed to collect myself and just watch the monitors. Um, so yeah, at the end of the investigation on the way home, Katie says, "Where did you go?" And I said, "I don't know. I felt like I was being pushed someplace, and
Mm-hmm.
when you were talking to me, I could hardly hear you. You sounded like you were way at the other end of the hall."
Yeah.
So she says, "Yeah, something tried to take you over." I'm like, "Oh yeah," and that
Yes.
wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, right. No, no, no. They
Nope.
and probably whoever that was like before in other words, almost like you were distracted because
Yeah.
here you are, you're setting up. So it was like an easy mark.
Mm-hmm.
No, and the reason why I asked you if I've had experiences myself on some investigations, not all the time, but sometimes, some cases there's something more intelligent or malevolent, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes the homeowners kind of fudge a little bit on how
Yep.
extreme stuff is, and almost, for lack of a better word, the investigators get ambushed in the sense that they're prepared but not really prepared,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden they're like, what is this? And it's almost like the homeowner was afraid of being too truthful about what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
because they're thinking nobody's going to want to come out here and lend us a hand because it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course, here's this these poor team members who, I tell everybody, sometimes, first of all, really dark, in my experience, really dark events. It's rare. It's not that common as people think.
No.
It's
No,
not.
everyone thinks there's demons in every
Oh, no,
corner,
no, no. It's like, yeah,
your
okay.
house is a portal to hell, but it's not true.
Right, exactly. And it's, to me, it's like, okay, yeah. And unfortunately, I'm going to blame reality TV on that.
Yeah.
I go, especially for some of us that have been alive a little bit longer.
Hmm.
I remember back in '73 when The Exorcist came up, people were like pulling their
Hmm.
hair out.
Yep.
Everybody was like, "Oh my god!" And
Yep.
that was just, But now everybody's like, all right, because
It's tame.
it's tame. Well, now everything, like you said, is a D word demon, or
Yeah.
possessed and all that. But yeah, in reality, first of all, it's very dark, but it's very rare. You know, but every once in a while, and I tell everybody that, everybody, of course, equates dark hauntings with demons. And I go, sometimes you will have an intelligent haunting that was a human being who was
Mm-hmm.
a bad person when they were alive. They were just
Yeah.
dark. And
If they're bad in living, they're going to be bad
right,
when they cross over.
I go, haven't you ever met a person, a live person that just gave you the wrong vibes? Like, man,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this person. I want to get away from. Well, it's the same experience sometimes when you encounter an entity, a ghost of somebody that was like that in life, where you're thinking, I want to look for the nearest exit. I want to get out of here. Something is really off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily a non-human entity. It's just that your inner, you're just getting that thing of, I want to get away from whatever this person is, even though I can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Some.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, no, no. That doesn't necessarily have to be a non-human entity.
Yeah.
People always equate with bad feelings.
Yep. No, I was going to say that sometimes too, if even if they were friendly
Yeah.
and they're trying to communicate with whoever's, I'm going to use a home. If they're trying to communicate with whoever's living in the home and that individual just is not aware that they're there, that entity's got to get really frustrated and say, come on,
Yes.
I'm here. And,
Right.
sometimes if something gets thrown or if you get poked, it's not necessarily malevolent. It's just like they're so frustrated and they're trying
Yes.
to get your attention.
Right. Exactly. And I tell them, I say, think about, you as a regular live person. What happens when either you're ignored, or when you start getting
Hmm.
frustrated or desperate, you start getting upset, you start getting
Yeah.
mad, and you're like, okay, what do I need to do to up the ante so somebody pays attention?
Hmm.
Or in some cases, if you've got one of these ghosts who is claiming the space, what they
Hmm.
want to do is kick your butt out the front door.
Yep.
Because as far as they're concerned, this is their house, their space. Who are you guys? You're strangers. Get out. And they lost the part of that, you don't have a human body, so you don't need a house. They just have that ownership thing, especially
Hmm.
if they live there for a really long time. They're trying desperately is to just make you leave. Just like I said, like if a stranger comes into your front door and you're like, what? Get out,
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing.
Exactly.
Same thing. Same thing.
Totally
Yeah.
agree. I always
Uh,
tell people when they investigate too, always have respect.
yes.
Don't do like a lot of these shows where they're trying to provoke. And
Oh,
I use the example, let's say you're sitting in your living room and someone walks in and says, "Hey, what are you doing? Do you know you live here?" Of course you're going to fight back. But if you
yes.
walk in and say, "Hey, my name's Kat, can I talk? I've come here to talk to you." You're going to get a whole different
Yes.
reaction.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Plus, I also think I mean, I'm not into either provoking or confrontation, period, no matter
Mm,
what.
mhm,
But especially when you really don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to, in other words, you could make a bad situation worse.
Yes.
And if you do that confrontation and you leave, because of course you're only going to be there X amount of hours, then the
Hmm.
family or the person that's left
They're
there
going to
living
pay for
there,
it.
oh
Hmm.
boy, do they pay for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been doing this for many, many years, and it's not the first time that a couple of hours of leaving, they make a phone call saying, this place is going, it's like, they're like ready to go and sleep in a motel
Hmm.
because things have just ramped up tremendously. Uh, and it's usually because somebody inexperienced, wanted to get some type of reaction, something to happen or
Hmm.
whatever, and they did that confrontation or that and it's like that's a bad idea, especially if you don't know exactly what you're dealing with.
Hmm.
And I've also heard of
I used to kind of make, go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead. You were saying that you used to what?
Uh, Oh, no, I used to make fun because you're seeing more and more people giving courses on how to investigate. And I
Right.
kind of, in the beginning, I used to kind of make fun of those, thinking, really, are you kidding me? But now that I think of it, it's a really good idea because if you want to get into investigating, why not learn how to do it the proper way?
Yes, I agree.
Teach you about the equipment that's used, you know.
Yes. I I I I think also an area that sometimes is overlooked is being professional when you're going into somebody's house,
Yes.
you know, where, not all the time, but chances are they don't know you, you don't know them. And it could go both ways. Making them feel at ease or also looking as far as the safety of the team as well.
Hmm.
There's an area there, when you finally get there where it's kind of, where people are judging, how truthful are they, what kind of vibes you give, like, are you competent, are you sympathetic, are you going to be
Hmm.
helpful, and then there's times I've told, I there have been times, not that often, where if you feel unsafe as a team, as a team overall, depending, I don't know what, however many people, then you can beg out and actually leave. And when I mean safe, I'm not talking in a supernatural sense. I'm thinking that you go someplace where the people or the setting makes you very uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and you're thinking, I fear for my safety, like something here is not right.
Yeah.
There's sometimes in courses like that you have to consider that as well. It's not strictly just the supernatural aspect of an investigation. It's the reality, the practicality of what's involved.
Yeah.
Uh,
We always bring a indoor shoes when we're investigating so we
mm-hmm.
can switch out our shoes because you don't know what kind of situation you're going to be walking into for a home. We've been in some homes that are spotless, and we've been in some homes it's like, yeah, I don't want to take my shoes off.
Oh God,
So,
yeah.
and
Yes.
we're not judging, we're there to try and help the people, but it's like we always say bring indoor shoes, like even if it's Crocs or something, just
Yes.
something that has not been worn outside.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree. I've been to places where it's like I'm not sitting there or there or there, because from what I'm seeing around, I just have a feeling there's, even I have a feeling, even though I can't really see it, there's some, something's
Yeah.
on that, like, yuck.
Yeah. Have a
Yeah.
seat. No, I'm good. I'll
I'm
stand.
good.
Thanks. I've been sitting
Exactly.
all day.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And people don't realize that stuff we laugh about it, but people don't realize that can really happen
Yeah.
when you go to an investigation, that you come across stuff where you're like, okay, I'm here thinking of how am I going to investigate the claims that these people have, but right now, really, what I'm worried about is what, something just crunched under my foot. Was that a bug? Was that, stuff like
What was that?
what was that exactly? Yeah, it's
Ghosts
like
don't normally crunch.
crunch, exactly, like yes, and people don't realize that there's and by the way, and I tell people that those type of scenarios is a lot of times what builds a good relationship among team members that
Yeah.
gel, because
Yep.
everybody kind of looks at one another like yeah, stuff like that. and it's almost like comic relief later on.
Yeah.
But it happens. People don't realize it really does happen where you go to places that are either really old, or the people are not the best housekeepers,
Hmm.
or it's just it's just like things that make you feel like, God, I want to investigate, but ugh.
Yeah. Go in with a hazmat suit.
Yes, yes. And yeah, and I've had experiences, again, not that often, but sometimes you will go to some places where if there's some type of mental illness going on that's
Hmm.
contributing to what they're claiming, you realize when you get there person has a problem, and the way their house is, and a lot of stuff that
Hmm.
you're like, oh, okay, there's something. Okay, there's a problem here. That's not the supernatural that I have to worry about here, or
Yep.
investigating it. It's like, yeah, it's people don't realize when you go into strangers' homes, exactly 9 times out of 10 people are just normal and they've got something going on and they're
Hmm.
trying to figure it out. But every once in a while, you do run across situations that you're like, I wasn't prepared for this. Or, sometimes, and I don't know if the team that you belong to can do like a pre-interview with,
Yes, we do.
right? And sometimes pre-interviews don't really give you a good heads up until you get there.
Yep. Well, we usually, with the pre-interview, some of the questions that we ask are, are you on any medications, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Have you had any unusual stress? Is there anything in the on the property that could harm the team members or
Yes.
people living in the home? It's questions that you have to ask.
Sure. Sure. Yes. And then this is the thing nowadays, unless you're a very, I want to say, unprofessional, those people, they're going to have to answer those questions to just about any paranormal team
Hmm.
that they call in for help.
Yep.
And yeah, and I mean, and sometimes, and that's another giveaway that I don't know if you've run across this situation. I say, one of the questions is usually, have you had anybody else come into the house to do an
Hmm.
investigation?
Yep, we do.
And if you start getting an answer along the lines of several investigations, you have to ask yourself, okay, what's going on there?
Hmm.
Because, okay, not every team that's gone out there is going to be a bad team, in other words.
Yeah. I kind of look at it as if the client has had other teams in before. Maybe they didn't get the results that they were hoping for, and they're
Yes.
going to call in another team in hopes that they're going to say, yes, it's
Yes.
demons.
Yes, it's demons, or it's dark, or it's this, or it's that,
Yeah.
or for all you know, they could have gotten more than one result. As in, no, there's nothing here. We can't. We don't.
Hmm.
Or hey, I think you've got a broken something. It might be anything but supernatural. In other words, and
Yeah,
sometimes
high EMF
high
from
MFs.
an old lamp or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bad wiring.
yeah. I mean, it could I people don't realize. I mean, you could start all the way from your electric box out to. I
Hmm.
mean, EMF, high EMFs can cause a lot of very unusual but really bad symptoms that
Yep.
people that are experiencing a haunting. Depends. Every person's different. It depends on the level of EMFs and
Hmm.
etc. But absolutely. But yeah, a lot of times people don't want to hear that, or they'll think, no, 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 I know, and it's like, yeah, all right, EMFs
Yeah.
affect your brain,
Yeah.
but
There's infrasound as well that can have really
yes,
nasty effects on the human body.
yes, 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 and let me ask you, and sometimes it's, I tell everybody, even though with a pre-interview, usually, and I would handle a lot of those, but there was a point that you kind of talk sometimes to each member that's had an experience. I would tell them your best bet is to go away out of true earshot from
Hmm.
the rest of the family,
Yeah.
because you'd be surprised sometimes what people will confess to when they really think nobody can overhear them, including other family members, husband, wives,
Hmm.
where they'll kind of like either retell, like either one, they've been having this experience long before they came maybe to that property.
Hmm.
In other words, it's almost like, wait a minute. So here, and I tell them, be truthful. If you want help, you got to be truthful.
Yeah.
And you find out, maybe this is not a case of a haunted house. This is a case of a haunted you.
Yes. Something you brought, you're bringing something with you.
Exactly, exactly.
And it's
Um,
intent too. Like
mm-hmm.
we've been to investigations before where, because we always ask the client afterwards, what do you want us to do? Like if we find, do
Yes.
you want us to smudge? Put holy water in the corners, what do you want us to do? And most of the time they're like, we want it gone. Even if it's grandma, we want it gone. And it's
Right,
like, okay, fair enough. And a lot of times after we do the cleansing,
right.
we'll get a message saying, I need you to come back. Well, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times it's because that one of the individuals who live in the house, their intent is like they want it to be there. So they're bringing it back. And we have to tell them no, like, especially if you have children. We've had an instance before where it's like, okay, you have children, you have to own this. And I told one lady one time, I said, you need to use your mom voice and say, this is my house. You will leave
Yes.
my family alone. You get out. And
And
yeah, so
yes, people sometimes, I don't know why they have such a hard time, like, being authoritative. I
mhm,
said, and I tell them, if right now somebody walked into the front, front door of your house and just came in, what would you do? Would you
yeah,
tell them, oh, please, can you leave now? You tell them, get the hell out of my house. I go,
yeah,
you need to take ownership of your space just the same way.
hmm,
Um, and tell whoever, whatever, to get out.
yep,
That typical thing that they have in all scary movies about get out. Well, it's your
yeah,
turn. It's the
it's
other way
true.
around. You're telling them get out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like you have the power, and it only works if you believe.
Yes, and I find that a lot of people, for some reason, have a hard time with that. And another part of it, exactly like what you said before, that after you smudge or whatever you've done for them,
Hmm.
they'll call you and usually what I tell them is you've got to really want it.
Yeah.
In other words, let's say the team or whoever's there can smudge or whatever it is, holy water, whatever you do, right? But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, we are not the ones that live here. If
No.
anybody truly, truly has the power to oust, you are the one that's living in this space. So it's up to you to say, I want you out of here right now, and I don't want you to come back, and really mean it. Because then there's the other, and I don't know if you've run across this, people that are kind of excited that they have a ghost.
Oh, yeah.
and it's like, it's not going to leave if you really want it to stay, or because you think wow, it's so interesting. And I tell them, you know what, in my experience, this usually, even if you, maybe if what your experience is not really dark or, scary, eh,
Hmm.
usually down the road, might be months, might even be years, something's going to happen where it's going to go south on you.
Hmm.
Okay? You're not going to be happy with the results. I tell them that all the time. And if no, whether it's us or anybody else comes in here and does stuff, but if one of you or all of you or somebody here is wishing or wanting or trying to contact or talk to this entity, guess what? It's not going to go anywhere. It might, you might have things slow down maybe for a few days or a week,
Hmm.
but it's not going anywhere because
No.
basically you're giving it permission to remain here. And that's why I found that a lot of people, uh, when they do that, hey, I need you to come back thing, it's more along the lines of, you know what, you have got to really mean it. And people, again, I've had investigations where they really don't. In other words, they call in a paranormal team really just to tell me, hey, can you get me their names? Can you tell me who it is? It's a ghost,
Yeah.
right? Right, right, right. Well, who are they?
Yeah.
Who are they? And it's like,
Mm.
all right, okay, I know where this is going. And I tell them, I give them the disclaimer. I say, look, ultimately, we're going to do what you want. Like what,
Hmm.
like what you mentioned before. We're going to, what are your wishes? Do you want it to be gone? Do you want it?
Hmm.
We're going to do what you want because you live here. My
Yeah.
advice, though, is move this spirit on to go to the place where they're supposed to be. This
Hmm.
is not the place for an entity that for some reason has lost their way, whether by choice, by accident. It's not, because
Hmm.
eventually being among humans that are alive, there's gonna be a moment of where it's gonna get ugly and dark, possibly. Because, like you
Yep.
said, human beings
Totally
get
agree.
frustrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've had calls sometimes months afterwards. Oh no, where they tell you it's okay. Well, it's a, and then yeah, sure enough, maybe a few months, maybe a year, sometimes a little bit, they get in touch with you, and what if they move out, or they call you and say, well, you know what, things have ramped up,
Mm-hmm.
now this is happening, and now we're seeing this or that, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's because I'm not that. I know some investigators are very what's the word I'm looking for? They're much
Larry?
more open about,
Oh, yeah.
okay, well, if it's not dark and it's nobody's getting hurt, then it's okay. And I'm like, I'm not in that. I think you know if you really want to, how can I say, get rid of the problem before it gets worse. Like
Mm-hmm.
termites or like
Mm-hmm.
bug infestation. Get rid of it while you can. And this is a
Yep.
human soul, by the way. This is one of the things I stress to people that get all excited about the ghost thing, especially if it's. And we're talking here an intelligent haunting, not a residual.
Mm-hmm.
Residual is like there's nothing really there. I said, look, do you realize that this is a human soul who, either because of habit, confusion, fear, they're trapped in a plane where this is meant only for people with human body, with a living body. Can
Mm-hmm.
you imagine what that's like? Do you really would you like that? And or if it's a loved one, would you really want that, or wouldn't you want them to move on to a place where they're supposed to be, not here, wanting to be or do things that they can't anymore?
Yep.
And
Got to be so frustrating.
absolutely, of course it is. And I ask all my guests, but I want to ask you: have you ever had anything ever follow you home?
Yes, not from an investigation. I worked at a hotel once where we had a little girl there, and we just named her Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And she came home one time with me, and
Oh,
my
okay.
son and I are sitting in the living room. My daughter's in the kitchen, and she kept saying, "What?" And my son and I are looking at each other, and we're like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "You keep calling my name." I'm like, no. So she was picking up on it. The little girl wanted to hang out with her, right?
Okay.
Or one time we had a pretty long kitchen. My daughter and I were cooking, and she says, "Would you stop flicking my bra strap?" And I looked at
Wow.
her. I said, "I'm not doing anything." I said, "I would have to move pretty fast to
Right.
do that." And then she looked at me, and I'm like, "Mary's here." I knew it. And I told her she needed to go back to the hotel. And she did.
Now, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. It's like, thanks, but
Yes.
no, you're not welcome here.
Yeah. You know what? I don't get me wrong. I understand sometimes that there are genuinely human spirits of children. I understand that, but I'm also very, very leery about stuff that sometimes pretends to be children.
Yes. That's how
And
they lure you in.
yes, yes. It's
Hmm.
like that's like the Trojan horse, because let's face it,
Hmm. Yep.
most human beings are like, you want to protect a child, you feel sorry, it's a
Hmm.
child, oh my God, blah 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 blah, and then before you know it, yeah, uh huh. And if you have something that's intelligent and dark, it's like, okay, this is the perfect way to get an invite. And people sometimes don't realize that a lot of these things proceed after an invitation, even
Yep.
though because a lot of people think of an invitation as in, I invite you, like a formal invitation. And I think in a metaphysical sense, sometimes people don't realize that the invitation could be extended in a lot of different ways. You know,
For sure.
Sometimes a lot of sympathy. Oh, well, if you want, it's okay. And it's like,
Yeah.
ew,
Hell no.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like, yeah, you have to have, especially as an investigator, you have to have really tight boundaries. And another thing I found, Kat, and you tell me, I don't know if you've run across a situation, is sometimes people will go to an investigation, whether it's a private residence or maybe even a historical place, and
Hmm.
sometimes you have, you do kind of know who it is, or maybe there's already been some type of research done, and people sometimes tend to romanticize events about people, uh, or they kind of feel sorry for them, and it's like, don't do that, you know,
Hmm.
because because they think of it in the past like that. Oh, that was so romantic, or oh, that was that was in the past. And it's like, don't do that. Like, you hear about some of these old hotels where, they have prostitutions and suicides and, people getting shot and
Mm-hmm.
really violent stuff. And people tend to think that was wow. And it's like, think about
Yeah.
living like that, you know, now. You wouldn't, believe me, you would think, get me out of here. There's,
Yeah.
yeah. That those things, yeah, it's safe when you're looking at it or reading about it, but the reality of living under those circumstances is
Mm-hmm.
really heavy duty, and people tend to overlook it, as far as when they do investigations, just how dark sometimes, if not the actual entity, the atmosphere, what we were talking about originally,
Yes.
how it impregnates the
The
location,
walls.
the walls,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And if you, and you'll have people sometimes that are sensitive that don't know they're sensitive. Like almost like what
Mm-hmm.
happened with you when you described that you had gone into the bathroom not realizing what it was, and that
Yeah.
all of a sudden, and you'll have people go into these places and they'll just thinking, well, it's an old hotel or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
not really think about the real history of what happened there a lot. And then they start acting weird. And I'm not talking here because they're getting jumped. They're just, or they become overcome, or they
Yeah.
they just get really affected by the events, the emotions that happened over and over again in that place,
And they don't know why.
and they don't know why. They don't know why. And let me ask you, what I've had. Let me ask you something. Are you still working with that paranormal group, or
Yes.
no?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
We're not as busy. We could be, but it's just the team members all like. I'm actually going back to school right now. Plus, I'm working. I have the
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Yes.
And all the team members. It's just very difficult to get everybody together now.
Yes, I know what that's like.
But we still do them.
Yes. Yes, I understand. I mean, I've been doing this for a really long time, and a lot of people say, I go, you'd be surprised how many times I was the fill-in for a warm body, because let's face it, people have their lives, their families, jobs, and a lot of these members, sometimes they want to participate, but they couldn't,
Hmm.
or something comes up at the last minute, and you know, I would never, suggest anybody to do an investigation by themselves.
Oh no.
Ever,
It's
ever.
not just because of the paranormal, but it's just for what
Yes.
if you walk in a hole and break an ankle and you're by yourself and
Yes.
you're stuck there for hours at a time.
Yes.
It's just safety
Absolutely.
reasons.
Safety reasons. Just
Gotta
that it's
have
a
that buddy
lot of.
system.
Yes, I tell them, if something happens, apologize and call it off.
Hmm.
Back out and say, look, sorry, I can't, do it. But yeah, I mean, I filled in for a lot of people at the last minute, because of that. And but yeah, I think it's a fascinating field. It's just, and it's really exciting when you actually have something legitimately happen.
Hmm.
But if you're not prepared to go through cases or circumstances that are like, I just want to just like lie down here and just go to
Yeah.
sleep, or you're just almost tempted to doze, then it's not for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that go in there thinking they're going to be, stuff is going to fly across the room. And it's like, this is it?
I've
Yeah,
never seen that.
that's it.
Still waiting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I've had stuff where usually, if we usually have like a little mini meeting afterwards. Like we'll drive to a nearby parking lot, because we're not going to do this outside the client's home,
Hmm.
and we
Yep.
do like, and we're not going to have a conversation about whatever experience, if especially if the client's there. So we usually will get together, like, hey, at the parking lot of either the gas station, somewhere close by. Let's just have like a real quick. I mean, we've had experiences where people have had. I mean, we've had stuff. One lady, stuff was moving around inside her car in the trunk.
Oh
Um,
wow.
there was another time that we were, and it was like kind of late. It was around like, I want to say maybe after midnight, 1 a.m., and we were like in a corner gas station, and the streets are deserted. I mean, it's like very quiet, and we're just talking real quick, like, hey, everything okay, blah blah, stuff, chit chat, 10 minutes. And all
Hmm.
of a sudden, we're hearing somebody having like a a conversation, but you can't make out. And when you're like not paying attention,
Yeah.
and then you look around and they're like, who's talking? And then you look around and you realize there's nobody around. Who's having that conversation? We've had experiences like that, which is, by the way, is why I sage my vehicle down very well
Yeah.
before I leave. But yeah, stuff like that happens more often than people think because, number one, you were trying to communicate with them. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, more than likely, you have more than one sensitive among your group. Different degrees of it, but after you do this for a while, you become a sensitive, if not a downright
For sure.
out and out psychic. So for an entity, and you have a lot of what I call entities that really maybe are not part of that location, but are drawn in because it's like here you are trying to communicate. So they're taking the opportunity to say, hey, what's going on with them. So yeah.
Like a moth to a flame.
Oh yeah. Yeah. People, that's why sometimes people sometimes will come across names or even EVPs and stuff that doesn't exactly coincide with who or what was expected.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, sometimes who comes across may have nothing whatsoever to do with either that family or that place. But they wanted to take the opportunity and basically muscle in. You remember that movie that Whoopi Goldberg and Patrick Swayze, Ghost.
Yes.
That part where she's in there and all these different spirits are in there trying to muscle their way forward, trying to, hey, I'm gonna I want her to. And I say that, believe it or not, that's not far from the reality of entities that want to get somebody to a message or, hey, why doesn't anybody pay attention to me anymore?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting field, and a lot of things. And despite in a good way, I say the paranormal reality stuff is good because it's made it more mainstream. Bad because everybody thinks everything's paranormal.
Yeah. It irritates me too when I watch those shows. Well, I don't watch those shows anymore. I just have a hard time with it. But they're entertainment.
Yes.
But the thing that irritates me the most is when the camera's on them and they say, "Did you see that?" No, the camera was on you.
or did you hear that? But then they play this real strong music. It's like, who can hear anything? All I heard was your music.
Right.
Did you hear that? Dun, 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 dun. And you're like, what? Okay. Yeah. Or did you see it said hatchet? It's like, well, yeah, now of course when they repeat whatever it is, I'm going to hear hatchet because you just told me what I'm going to hear.
I usually like to ask people, what did you hear? And because I don't want to put in their mind what I heard, and then they're going to say, yeah, that's what I heard too. No, what did you hear?
Exactly. But they kind of don't do that.
Yeah.
They kind of like tell you, did you hear that? Yeah, what? And then they mouth out like, it said, whatever. And you're like, okay. But not a good majority of the times, if there would have been no suggestion, you would have heard like, and it'd be like, I don't know what that's saying. But yeah.
Or it sounded like a sneeze to me. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, Kat, I wanted to thank you so much. You have been a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
No, absolutely. I've enjoyed it tremendously. It's great to speak to another investigator. That, like I said, this field is really fun, especially when you go through the ups and downs of, investigation, the real stuff, the real investigations versus what you see on TV. And one of the things I tell people, you have to have a sense of humor about this work, because let's face it, you're talking here and you're working with dead people. If you don't have a sense of humor, forget it.
Yeah. I just want to say quickly, I think the thing that fascinates me the most of the paranormal is every culture has some kind of a paranormal experience.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
And it just amazes me.
Yes. And it's, some of them, yes. And like you said, cultures, some of them handle it different ways. Some of them, like, you can't speak of the dead at all. You can't even mention their name because they fear that this will bring the family member, for example, back.
Yep.
And then others will, ancestor worship.
Open arms.
Yeah, ancestor worship.
Yep.
But overall, though, there's always, I want to say, for lack of a better word, there's always a fear of Ghosts, not spirits. When I say ghost, a spirit, versus a spirit that's ascended and is maybe coming back to visit versus a ghost. Most cultures have this fear of a ghost as in a restless spirit causing problems for the living.
Hmm.
That I see that across most cultures. They have some form of, boy, I need help, like call in whatever, whoever.
Hmm.
And it's just too coincidental, for the skeptics out there that don't want to believe that there's anything that happens with humans after they die.
Hmm.
I beg to differ. There's too many. There's too
Agreed.
long a history across different civilizations, cultures, whatever you want to call it, that coincide in the same thing.
Yeah, something's going on.
Oh, absolutely, something's
Mm.
going on. Again, Kat, thank you so much, darling. It has been wonderful. And for my podcast listeners, if you want to repeat, what is the website for your podcast show?
Oh, I don't know it offhand.
Paranormal. Okay, I don't have a problem.
Paranormal Heart. It's you can find it on Podbean, YouTube, Stitcher. You can find me
Perfect.
pretty much everywhere.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I have it here as paranormalheart.podbean.com. But like
Yep,
I
that's
said
the main
before,
location.
that's the main one. I will have a link to that actual website on the credits of the show.
Thank you.
All right, darling. Take care. Thank you so much.
Take care, love.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So, what did you think, guys? Isn't she nice? Real sweet lady. Real sweet lady. You know, um, and she's got her own podcast, and I love it. I love it when investigators they interview other people and they talk to other people and they what's the word I'm looking for, that they basically share experiences and ideas of good, bad, in between. Because I want to say, I know this sounds like so kumbaya, but they almost have a paranormal network, family, whatever you want to call it, regardless of how you conduct your investigations or what your personal beliefs are in the afterlife or whatever. um and it's almost like this is also how you learn. Before I've always said, yes, you can read books. I urge you can take a class, you can watch shows, whatever. And I'm going to say the two main things that really truly teach you about the paranormal and handling investigations and just the reality, like I said, the logistics of it, is field work, field work, field work, field work, and networking. Networking as in talking to other investigators about their experiences. Okay. This is how you really truly learn. Because there's a lot of people, like I said, you could read a lot of books, but there's so much. And this goes in all things in life, and I'm not talking only paranormal. There's nothing that replaces true life experience. Sometimes you're just never going to find that situation in a book. You just don't. Um, and hopefully either you run across it or you have a team member that's had that experience, or in this case, by extension, if you don't have a big team, you have somebody that says, you know what, I went on a case and this is what happened and this is what we did. Or don't do that because look what happened to us after we did that. Or I did that. And hopefully you're the kind of person that learns from, hey, you know what? I've used that innumerable times with people that I've said, I'm not going to do that because I remember this person telling me that this occurred. And you know what? Or that this is how they handled it. So guess let me think about this a minute. In other words, you don't need a 2x4 to hit you across the head to go, oh, well, that's how you do that. And I'm going to stress this again. A lot of people that get into this work are always just thinking about the equipment. Oh, do I have this camera? Do I have that equipment? Do I have this detector? That's great. The camera, that's great. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into paranormal work that One, you have to be fast on your feet, and I'm going to tell you why. You go to a place, unsafe neighborhood, something about where you're at, or unsafe structure that you have to really think about, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle it? Something unexpected. What if you go to a place and there's people there that you feel, this is not good, or just a lot of things can happen that you have to, in other words, okay, it's like, what do I do now? Yeah, I planned it. I've got all my equipment packed very neatly and, whatever, but now what do I do? Or, and this has happened to me, you will go to an investigation and you've been speaking to one person. I'm going to say, let's say one person who was gung-ho on the investigation was the one that contacted the team, the one that you spoke to, gave you the green light, yeah. Then when you get there, the other person, and let's say, I'm going to say a husband, wife, whatever, and that other person is not on board with what's going on. Okay, either they don't believe it or they do believe it, but they just don't want anybody there. They just don't want anybody in their house. They don't want to explore it. In other words, for lack of a better word, sometimes it's the fear of making it even more real if they have a paranormal team tramping through their house, because that's the way they see it. And then we'll actually give them proof that this other person that they're aware is actually, that there is something going on. So sometimes, I don't want to say hostile is the word, but you're not made to feel exactly welcome. Okay, that happens. So these are things, practical things that you need to know how to handle when you're there. And that's why I mean fast on your feet, like, okay, I've got all my things that I need to be prepared, but now I just pulled in and I got off and I'm being introduced. I met the person that my main contact person, and they're like, oh, and then you speak to the other person in the house, or maybe the other adult, and they're giving you the stink eye, and you're like, what is up with this? Why is this person like looking so unhappy? And then later on, somehow or other, it comes out, this other person really doesn't want you there, doesn't believe it, just doesn't want the team, blah, blah, blah. They're very uncooperative. That really puts you in an uncomfortable position. And you could say, well, then you know what, and then I'll just leave. Well, yeah, you could. I mean, if it's really excessive and you think that, but what if you've driven a distance? What if your team members have driven a distance to go to this investigation? To tell everybody, let's turn around and let's just go back home. That happens. That happens. I've had situations also where we've pulled up, and sometimes it's 2 or 3 cars. Like I said, we don't like none of that van or something with the insignia. Like most people don't want their neighbors to know that, that they've got this going on. Whatever. Let's say 2 cars, maybe 3, depends, pull up. And you've got the nosy neighbor who wants to know what's going on. And some of them will come out and ask, hey, who are you guys? Or they're like being really friendly. And you're like, how do I handle this thing with this person? Because sometimes, believe it or not, they can be a good source sometimes for information, especially if they've lived in the neighborhood for a really long time. So you don't want to like cut them off at the knees, either. But at the same time, you could tell that either they're eyeing you from across the street, what's going on. If it's somebody that's really, really nosy, they might come up and go, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? The concerned neighbor act. And it's like, how do I handle this without getting this person upset? But I'm not about to divulge to them that we're here to investigate a paranormal case in this house. Just think about it. That in some states, depending, in some jurisdictions, they have really certain laws in place concerning haunted houses and the sale of haunted houses and selling them. Okay, whether they have to disclose it outright, or in some cases they don't. In some cases they have to disclose it only if they're directly asked. But what if this person that you're doing the investigation at some point says, you know what, I'm out of here. I want to sell this place and just get out of here. I just don't want to be here anymore for whatever reason. So the last thing you ever really want to say is to a neighbor or anybody, yeah, we're a paranormal team and we're here investigating claims of paranormal activity in this house. You can't do that. It's confidentiality. And I've had that. I have had that. I've had neighbors like act concerned, like, oh, is everything okay? It was, like in your eye, and you're trying to figure out what's in that case you're bringing down, like what's going on, or they're across the street and they're watering their lawn, but they're like sizing up everything and everybody that's going on. You see? So, I mean, there's a lot of practical aspects in investigations where you have to know how to handle them. And this is how you learn. Field and networking. Speaking like we were to Kat about different situations. And what happens when certain things happen. So again, guys, I want to thank you so much for being part of my audience. As you know, you can go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com for links to either the shows, the podcasts. I also have links to all of my books. If you want to submit your story, whatever the case might be, your go-to place is going to be MiamiGhostChronicles.com. And that, of course, has links to the True Believers, True Stories at SupernaturalStorytime.com, NightShadeDiary.com. And, again, I'm always looking for good stories that either you experienced firsthand or you heard about, whatever the case might be. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab or email me at Marlene@MiamiGhostChronicles.com and we'll figure something out how you want to relate that story to me. Like I said, believe me, I don't prejudge. It could be way out there. It could have been a one-time incident. It could just be something unusual. I would love to hear it. So again, guys, thank you so much for being part of my audience. You are all wonderful, and take care. Till the next time.